3d6 down the line.
We're back in action. We're here.
I am buzzing, baby. I am buzzing.
I need to see both your hands right now.
Yeah. I could feel how excited you were, David. It was coming through the camera, I'll tell you what.
I've never seen David that excited for anything in my life. Like, nothing.
I hope he paid it off okay, David. Was it worth it? I hope it was a good release.
That was... Look, I've been edging for a long time. All right.
Whoa. I just noticed, usually, the camera angle on David is kind of back like this.
Yeah.
And as
David
this
was like
session
this
went
the whole
on,
time.
his face is in the camera.
Yeah. It was good shit. I love the use that you've done 3 times now with the assassination. I like the fact that we actually incorporated that rulings over rules sort of thing for OSR, like the notion that if you can, the hard part is positioning yourself to do a death blow like that, right? Yes. And then there's just no reason not to give the player the death blow, right? Yeah. We see these modern systems try bend over backwards to give you realistic notions of coup de grace. And it's none of it really ends up making sense in certain circumstances. It's 3 times critical damage. It's okay, but what if it doesn't kill them? It doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean?
Not just that, but there are so many situations in which, and you can't blame, by any means, you can't blame a DM for calling a roll. But there's so many situations in which it's very obvious that it would just be an assassination in this case, and the minute you call a roll in a circumstance like that, it's punitive, right? It immediately is a rejection, both of the creativity of the situation, all the planning that leads into it. And it's ends up being self-defeating because not 9 times out of 10, but most often it'll fail and turn into a combat that will fuck the player over.
Yeah, exactly.
And so all of that preparation is punished, and it's not intentional on the person doing the arbitration, but it's really hard to do rules as written and make it work that way.
The only addendum to that I would say, and this is me playing devil's advocate, is
that
you do have mechanics for other classes, namely the thief and the assassin, to attack from surprise and do a certain amount of damage. Why would a thief who is hidden and concealed ever do a backstab if they could just automatically jam a dagger through somebody's neck?
Because they could do it.
Agreed. Maybe they should do that.
they could, but the difference is, in at least the way I envision it, we never actually seen it in action, but is that they could do it in combat.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like a thief could position
himself. What
about
an assassin's assassin ability, which doesn't necessarily seem to be a combat ability per se, does it?
I'm not really familiar with it, so I can't really speak to it. But you're probably right. It probably would conflict with the way that we rule these things. But yeah.
I would argue in this case that the difference here is that there's 2 powerful magics in effect: silence and invisibility.
Yes,
right, which is a big difference over a concealed thief, right? And
that's very true.
To some extent, I think that's very fair in that magic is what tips it over into being better than skill, in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Although the other thing I think it's also fair to point out, and this is historic fact, you get someone lying their head down on the block, the headsman comes up and can botch that roll up, right? But this does not necessarily mean that David slid that dagger into Isocritus' throat for a perfect kill, right? It just means that, he's now lying on the ground bleeding out. He's going to die in seconds, right? It effectively in our
silence,
game is the same.
Yeah.
In silence.
The other reason why, though, that these rules exist, and again, here's me playing devil's advocate, because there's absolutely nothing to prevent John from doing the same exact thing to us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
as a player, if I have
would suck.
Exactly. But as a player, if I have worked 35 sessions or whatever to get my dwarf up to level 4, and then some silenced delusioned mook comes up and shoves a dagger between my beard, and I die without any kind of chance for a roll or any kind of a chance for a survivability, that wouldn't feel good.
That's a fair point, but you know I would never do that.
I know you wouldn't do that, John, but you could. And frankly, after us doing it 3 times to named NPCs, you probably should, because at this point, every BBEG out there.
Stop talking.
Every BBEG out there is probably like, wow, this is great. Why didn't we think of this before? And just invest in mortality? Why not just invest in invisibility
Well,
and silence?
for one thing,
hold on, Mike. I'm like, can I jump in, John? Sorry.
Yeah.
A couple things that I think Ted said that I'd like to respond to. Three or two now. What's the third that I did this to?
You did Roz Kelly, you did Blonde
Vig,
and you did this guy.
Yep.
True.
Yeah.
Okay. In both Roz Kelly and Blonde Vig's case, I was flying. Right. So the simulation, the rules, like the simulation of the role is going through as like a metaphor for combat. Stealth combat, in my mind, accounts for like senses, accounts for all sorts of things that would tip someone off to activity. What made John rule positive on me stealthily killing both of those two was that I was flying. No way for noise to admit from me doing that, right? And that was, again, not to like defend myself too much, but that was an intentional thought process I went through, right? Like there's an architecture to that endpoint, in the same way that I was debating now whether we should have the silence bubble already present and potentially key him off, at which point he might go, what's that? Why is it silent? And me trying to stab him wouldn't work, right?
Exactly.
Which is why I was like, you need to be out of that range so that there's nothing that interrupts my ability to do this without,
Yes, you were planning for as many eventualities as possible so that you could prevent me from making a roll.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the analogy I would draw to Mike's point, which is a good point, but it's like, think about traps, right? Like there's an inversion here where like, yeah, of course, technically anything can happen in two directions, but the DM has less transparency than the players because the players are discussing their intent over and over and over again. And a lot of good DMs will telegraph stuff, right? And I think the culture is moving more and more into telegraphing things. So the trap example I give is like the classic thing is the pressure plate, right? You allow the player to step on it, but that isn't instant death. It's a puzzle to solve to then like extricate yourself from a mine before blow. And like, I think it is certainly fair, right, for a player to, again, I'm biased here, but a player to sort of go through that puzzling to the point in which that metaphor of combat, right, is no longer necessary, right, is no longer a shorthand. And the way that like a DM can't necessarily do without it being game breaking in multiple ways, right? Mm-hmm. Like there has to be a certain level of asymmetry there because there's so many other ways in which the DM has a outsized amount of control on the world.
Right. Yeah, and it would be a complete abuse of my authority to do that sort of thing. What I would end up like in a scenario like that, Mike, what I would end up doing is if I had a powerful creature that could mimic what Onweir would do is it would be very difficult to do exactly what Arden would do. So there would almost always be some sort of possible giveaway to it, which I would then telegraph, and that you would have to then act upon. But if you didn't act upon it, then sorry. It would also be, I would likely do the same thing if there was like a powerful wizard that could do silence and fly and attack invisibly or something like that. You would probably know that they had that capability.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I would telegraph that. Like this guy has powerful spells. Like be aware. You know what I mean? Like don't enter his lair without really thinking carefully because he's got this ability to do this. And then if you didn't heed my warning, if you didn't pick up on my telegraph, then it's fair game. That's kind of probably how I would do it. You know,
I think that's totally fair. It's a diegesis thing, kind of, right? Like if you were constructing a dungeon and there was a being capable of doing this, you'd have leitmotifs showing them doing that, right? I mean, that's a little like on the nose, right? But you would provide information to telegraph that ahead of time, so that like if it did happen, it might feel in the immediate. I'm just reiterating what you said, like a surprise. But they would go, oh shit, we did see these three paintings playing this. We should have thought of that, and then it doesn't feel just like a surprise. Like
absolutely
again, punitive thing. Or the DM's just being cruel, right?
I'm just kind of speaking as now. I don't GM as much as John.
Sure.
Right? But if I was running a game and the same pony was being trotted out to perform flying invisible death Onweir, right? At some point, my wizard would probably have the equivalent of a stone skin on, or something else, right? Isocritus, we have no idea how powerful he was. There was nothing that said that there was not going to be some sort of like spell in place.
Force field.
Correct. Yeah. I actually checked it whenever when Onweir said what he was going to do. I went to his stat block and I was like, he may have something to prevent that from actually happening, but he didn't. So,
and to your point again,
he also didn't smell the shit on us. Right? We covered ourselves in shit. He also didn't have a chance to hear Onweir coming up behind him because he was not in the silence bubble. I'm not.
I wasn't
arguing with-
moving.
I'm
though.
not.
I was
Uh-huh.
sitting right next. I was standing right next to the
Sure.
book.
I didn't
But
read
all
it.
I'm
Yeah.
saying is that the roll represents you stubbing your toe or coughing
Yeah.
or sneezing, like, you know, because you're nervous or whatever.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
that's why those roles exist. And all I'm saying is that if I was the GM, I wouldn't have been as nice as John.
Yeah,
Well, let's keep this in mind too. This is a larger system. The payback isn't, you know, our payback, right, of doing this isn't that it might happen to us. It's that we kind of fucked ourselves out of the information that
Yes.
Isocritus had
Yes.
that we
Sure.
wanted.
That's we
And I
again.
would, and I would again, Mike, we're doing you know, back and forth for fun, right? But like again, I would piggyback on what Matt's saying in terms of system and say that like the like stakes in a large form OSR campaign are so much broader than a combat scenario,
Sure.
right? And if you're playing 5e or some similar game where 90% of the play is centered around combat rooms, right? In which the depth of that experience has less to do with like what's called combat as war, right?
Right.
And more combat as sport, then those systems have to exist because fundamentally what you're doing is you're throwing numbers against each other, right? And in a system like this, what is incentivized and encouraged, I would suggest, more times than not, is lateral thinking, right? Is using as little as possible. So take this pony I'm doing, right? I'm not going to be able to use it all the time. Even getting a situation in which I could use it was so dangerous, right? And the danger to it was so asymmetrical. One slip would have basically been an instant death from any of those apes. That like, it's not like we walked into a BBG room and we were like, it's time to fight the boss in 5e and then started throwing, right? It's just, we had already overcome so many obstacles to that point that, again, I'm biased, but I don't think John's taking it easy on us by allowing that. Because so many things have to merge, right, into that event. And even I didn't think about it until the circumstances led to it being possible because he said he was coming back towards us. And now we're like, oh, we have the books. We know he's coming to this place.
Yeah.
So things align for such a specific thing that, yes, it technically is the same move, right? But it's not a move that I'm going to be walking around the dungeon doing.
Yeah.
Not least of which because, you know, like I can't. But I don't know, it's very interesting.
I've changed to like my DMing style. Like I used to be the kind of where I would have made a roll like to see if it worked.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But I'm at that point where I am a little not easy on you, but it's just sort of like I like to reward clever thinking, and I think like if I led it up to a roll, even if the roll was successful, I think that would have deflated a little bit. You know what I mean?
That's true, man, because rolls sometimes do feel like a letdown, whether they're successful or not successful. And I think we've all experienced that. We've played every iteration of D&D since the inception, and some are better and some are worse.
Well,
but sometimes making that big roll at the end just kind
feels
of
good.
like
you know, a recent example where I actually regretted calling for a roll, and you guys can probably are thinking along the same lines is whenever Onweir wanted to spread his bag of ball bearings in the laboratory, and it was a great idea. You had it all thought out and all that kind of stuff, and I had the statue make a save to avoid it, and he easily saved because he was a powerful monster. And it was just like you could feel like the whole room deflate. Like I could feel it, you know what I mean? And it wasn't just like I could tell it wasn't just like, oh, it sucks that he made the roll. It was just like that the roll was even called for in the first place. I regret it. It should have been like because it was a cool idea, and you thought about it and you planned it carefully and you executed perfectly. The statue should have tripped and fallen. You know what I mean? In my
And I mean, I otherwise, like if that were to happen, John, without a roll and without any chance of it really failing, we would be sitting here with giant casts of ball bearings and throwing them down every hallway that we went down.
Yeah,
Like,
you're right. You're right. I can't argue with that.
I mean, that doesn't take the circumstances that you were talking about. So
I guess my question is, again, I'm crazy on here. Why is that a problem?
Why not cast ball bearings?
The existential question here. No, seriously, the existential question here is, if the world is so dangerous, and the real play style is the large macro factional like decision making that we're doing, why does it matter if we're throwing ball bearings down every hall? Ultimately, right? Like, does it make the game easy? No, I don't think it does.
Yeah.
Maybe it accelerates us to a harder encounter or a harder decision. Is the likelihood that we're going to die miserably around the next corner because we got cocky just as high? Yes. So it's not a situation in which we are like, winning over the entire game because the game is going to kill us. Period. We're going to
also
advocate tonight.
Yeah.
I would also advocate that monkeys would not be susceptible to a ball bearing trick as a giant animated statue.
Yeah, correct. Yeah,
100%.
100%.
Right.
But I to no one's surprise, I do agree mostly with David's thing. I think you're right. It's also like the same sort of thing where I was debating the qualities of Laryl Sack. Like David, you had the same sort of outlook on that, where you were saying like, why not just have it be able to, unlimited whatever we want. You know what I mean? And you can apply the same sort of reasoning to that. And I've kind of lean more towards that now in the way that I've ruled that sack, and
I think there's a balance. Like go, John. I didn't mean to cut you
I'm
off.
just saying, you're right that the world itself is difficult enough. It's hard enough. Like you are in a dungeon. You know that death lurks around every single corner. You need to take advantage whenever you can. That's why I've I like it when you guys find the really hidden stuff, where like the super powerful items like those Laryl's artifacts. Like where in a well-balanced modern dungeon, you wouldn't even be able to even think about getting those items until you were like 15th level or something like that. But giving the first level character a Holy Avenger that is immediately memorable and makes it just so much more fun. You know what I mean? It's just more fun to see like what I want to give you guys toys to play with, basically, to see like how it works.
Where exactly is the Holy Avenger?
Is that what the diamond room had hidden? I want to say one more thing.
You know what's hilarious though about that thing about the Laryl? They weren't hidden. No. They were right there off a room that we know other people have just walked on by. It's just like they were just sitting there, not even like disguised. I mean, like disguised kind of, right?
Yeah. But an example of like where you never found it, and I'm not going to give it away, but you were so close and you knew it was there, was Vargar's death in that palace, right? The plant, right? There was I kept on hinting like there's something glinting back there. It looks like it might be a throne of some sort, and it was behind that plant. Yeah. And you were doing everything to save Vargar and try to get to that stuff. That
was a great death, man.
Yeah.
I don't want to dominate the whole talk because I've been ranting a lot this session, but just again to piggyback a little bit on John. What else is new? All right.
No, go. Yeah.
Just again, like it's a broad topic that we could talk a lot about, but like getting into like theory of play, what I really love about arbitration as a prior, like not letter of the law, but like arbitration through a table, through a scenario that is like really supported by this style of game, is that what happens over time is that like granted we all know each other, but even if we didn't, like various reasoned and discussed scenarios become trust building dynamics that then establish precedents that pay off later on, like throughout the game. And then in inverse, if John, I mean, I didn't mind the Laryl, your ruling on the Laryl sack made sense to me, right? Like, and it's only, and you explained it well enough. There's like a dialect that goes on there that I'm like, makes perfect sense. No gripe. And if you were to come up with something later that said every time it rains, you guys freeze to death or something like that, maybe it would feel a little harsh. But what we've established through the style of play and through the dialect that we have in this, that's enabled by not following everything by the letter of the law, is an ability to be like, you know what? I think John's making a good point. That's true from now on. It may only be true in our game in this campaign. We may change our mind in the next campaign in the same system. But I think it's a really beautiful like cultural touchstone to this style of play that obviously I like a lot.
I totally agree. And I think a lot of that comes from that. I think that is another a good consequence of being friends at the table because you can have that conversation and know that you're not going to be met with like stonewalling or resentment or something like that. Like we could just hash it out, and kind of come to a conclusion. At least I hope we can.
I mean, that's not to say that over the last 20 years we haven't had our scrums.
Oh, of course.
We love to argue.
That's absolutely happened.
Yeah.
Speaking of scrums, Ted, you wanted to say something about like 10 minutes ago.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ted, did you have some bookkeeping you wanted to do?
Or? So sleepy right now. He's so tired.
Ted's sleepy, yeah.
No, I had a nap. I took a nap for this.
Ted, the floor is yours.
What I wanted to say was that I think, so it's an interesting comparison between the discussion about, well, now John can make his monster invisible and flying with a dagger and the barrel of ball bearings, right? So the flying dagger monster thing, that would be outright kind of cruel, John, and we've already discussed that. But I do think that something like, okay, we just go down hallways with barrels of ball bearings. So first of all, the system already has built in the encumbrance issue to go along with that,
right.
Leaving aside Laurel sack. But the other thing is that that's a very mundane item. And there's plenty of creatures in this dungeon that would figure out very quickly that they could do the same thing back to us. And that would be completely fair of John to take that around and say, oh yeah, the baboons gather all your bearings up, right? And the next time we come around, there they are waiting with belt bearings on us, that sort of thing. So yeah. I think that it's worth saying that John, should, as he's showed that like with the wick trimmer trick, the world adapts. I think we should totally expect to see creatures adapting to things that we do.
I agree, and it makes it fun too, right? It makes it like fun. A living, breathing, changing dungeon that that reacts to your your deeds. You know what I mean?
It is literally 100% the biggest difference between playing a TTRPG and playing a video game.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Because that level of adaptability can never be programmed.
Absolutely, 100%.
100%, right? Why else are we playing RPGs if we're not trying to have them be living, breathing organisms?
Yep.
I could grind a few axes about certain systems just along that video game point, Mike, but I won't. But Ted, you're 100% right. And you know what? I would find it really thrilling to walk into a hallway and see a bunch of ball bearings in it, because, like you said, the precedent set. I'd be like, oh fuck! But also now that's a fun thing we can solve. That's not like a burden. I mean, I'm biased, but it's not like a burden. I don't feel punished. I'm like, this is a new challenge. This is interesting. Yeah. It's a puzzle. I'm engaging with it. It doesn't feel canned because it's like dynamic, right? Like, I love it, man. I mean, that's it's super rad, right?
Yeah. That's what I liked about like this whole encounter that we just had in the library is that I set the parameters. And it becomes it's not like an automatic. What I liked about it is like the way that you guys approached it. I could tell that your first thought was not when do we roll initiative. It was this is a puzzle to solve. Like you know what I mean. But I'm just saying, like in another game, we're not going to name names here. Like you would immediately have been like, all right, it's either like we roll initiative or we back up. But you looked at it as like, okay, tell me what's going on here, and then let's figure it out. You know what I mean? And that's cool. Yeah. Like, you know what I mean? Like where you look at combat or a potential violent situation as a problem to solve rather than like a separate mini game that we're about to move into sort of thing. You know what I mean? That's I love that shit. You know, so
that being said, it was really hard not to stab Garrelad when he came out the library door.
Dude, I was waiting for you. I was waiting for you to say it, Mort. I was waiting for you to say it. Yeah.
Mort, if you had done it, I would have supported you. Even if we had all died, I would have supported you through it all.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I was kind of half hoping. I was like, "Come on, dude, get in there." but it probably would have gotten ugly real quick. More, I'll be honest with you.
We already know that the monkeys are an exponential force. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
although
one yell and we're done.
We should let Ted go to bed, so we'll do quick planning real quick. But before we drop off, I just want to make a reminder that the people that you were when you first found Garrelad, when David kind of stepped in it that first time, you were no longer those people. Like I'm not saying that you could go toe to toe with Garrelad. I'm not going to give you any hints, but I'm just saying you guys are
we're different. Yeah.
You're not small fry anymore. You know what I mean?
We got big boy pants.
And we have our illusionist with the spell book again, and that's going to be the shit.
It's okay. I'm still like level 1. What level am I, John? I don't even know anymore.
Yeah. We got to get out still. Like, I mean, let's not get out.
Yeah, you got to get out. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
And remember, now that he has his spell book, he has like, I think you still have like one in the chamber, right? Like you can cast a spell again.
No, I think we already established that you did not.
What? No, I had it memorized. Yeah, I have color spray, and now I have a bunch of gems to use color spray with. So I technically could cast color spray as my one memorized spell from way back.
But then you can also use the rock to get it back.
That's true. Get their random.
Yeah. Well, we don't have
that. You could use the rock to get it back, and then you could.
I don't know if you brought the rocks though. I don't know if you brought the rocks.
We didn't bring them, and I also can't cast spells and carry this bag in 2 hands. So
dude, I hope you make it out of here alive. It would be so brutal when you have the spell book and you die.
I got one more. I got one more invisibility. You got one more silence that you should probably re-up whenever you can, Matt.
You used all 3 of your invisibilities, dude.
Yeah, you did.
Oh, you're right. I'm my third.
But you're invisible right now,
But I'm at the start of it. I have 3 turns.
Right.
Yeah.
If we just flat out run back to our door, we probably be okay if all the because I mean depending on how those monkeys interpret what Geralt told them, go ruin that secret entrance. It's not a quick thing to do, even for big jobs like Cisco, you know.
True.
So I think we're probably got some time.
But you don't know how many goblins. You don't know how many baboons actually went with him.
Right.
Yeah.
But here's the main thing about it: as long as we're not engaging with them, we can just run right through the crowd of them. Whee! All we got to do is get to
all of
that
us
plunger,
Mort are
baby, and
invisible,
bam.
so Mort can't. But maybe we can carry him on our shoulders or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways,
Well,
that
I have a backup plan for Mort if he gets cut off from being able to get back, he's going to head for the secret door with the TV room and hide there.
Well,
Don't
why
forget
not
to
just hop in the
polymorph
bag of
into an
holding,
ape
baby?
too.
Take a deep breath, hop in the bag of holding.
you won't fit.
Well, again, don't forget you can. Don't forget if you're really worried, Mort, you can polymorph into a baboon and just walk out.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
straight up.
the polymorph. Yeah.
There's no reason. Like, and in
Right.
fact, if you're really worried something will go to shit, just do it. Don't save it until the emergency. Just do it and
that's
walk
what
out.
that's what they're there for. Yeah.
That's what it's here.
Yeah.
You could do that at the beginning next session. Walk out. We'll run invisible. We'll get to the door in no time.
Yeah.
I mean, like a couple turns.
I don't want to open that door as a polymorph baboon though, because Yost will be like,
true.
Oh, be behind.
yeah.
I smell baboon.
Just remember your signal.
Just make sure we see you do it. Just make sure we
No
see you do
signal.
it.
Yeah, but anyways, not to get too paternal, but
we should-
I'm very proud of you guys for the way that you handled that.
That was fun.
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah, it was.
Hey, I think you did a killer job setting it up too, man. That was so tense. All of the
It was super tense.
All of the suspense.
I didn't know how it was going to go down. I knew what their aim was, but I had no idea how it was. So I just was kind of watching it go down. And then you guys handled it.
You killed it.
Yeah, it was awesome. So
John, I do have one last question.
One more thing.
one more thing.
This is very
One more thing. Yeah.
Does Laryl think it would be funny if I killed Onweir?
Yes, he would think it would be hilarious. Yes.
David thinks it'd be funny if you killed Onweir. Dude, I would love the Avaricios dark arc where he just slaughters me, takes everything and runs.
He's already in that dark arc. You better keep an eye on him.
No, I know.
He's looking at like upending economies and shit like that. So you gotta.
Yeah, I know. Listen.
All right, boys.
All right. Yes.
right.
So real quick, so we can let Ted get his beauty rest. Next week.